Long time ago in Bethlehem, so the
Hi, I'm Ksenia, and I firstly want to start by just wishing everyone, all Lada's viewers, her astrologers, her psychics, and everybody involved with Lada's channel, a very happy Christmas and solstice season. May you know love, may you know joy, may you know much happiness and hope at this time. So today I'm going to be talking about the birth of Jesus as heralded by astrology. Obviously astrology is not very popular amongst certain religious circles, but it is an almost irrefutable truth when we look at the history and the connections and the implications of astrology at the time when Jesus was born. So I'm going to explore that with you. And I'm going to be drawing from a theory by an astrologer named Michael Molner, who researched this topic and found some very insightful and interesting things. So let's begin. So those of you who follow Lada's channel will be well aware from the seminars on Babylonian astrology and ancient astrology that astrology is considered to be 7,000 years old, possibly a lot more than that. But we know for sure it's at least 7,000 years old from the Babylonian, Sumerian cultures. And it's gone through a lot of changes in that time. It's evolved as it grew to become Egyptian astrology, Greek astrology, Vedic astrology, and then the many different factions that it's blossomed into and becoming Western, Hellenistic astrology and so on and so on. And it's run a very interesting course over time, but the key foundational principles and ideas are still the same as they were way back in the ancient times. So although Jewish scholars do not actually recognize astrology today, back in the days of King Herod, around 2,000 years ago, they were practicing astrology in Jewish circles, and many Jewish leaders would consult astrologers for information. And this has been proven to us by the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, where those beautiful ancient manuscripts revealed that astrology was actually used at the time that they were written amongst those people. So yes, ancient Jewish leaders and practitioners in those sections, in the sect that was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, were using astrology. So we know it was practiced at that time 2,000 years ago. So important rulers of that day would consult astrologers to get predictions about what was going to happen for their kingdoms, what was going to happen in terms of people being born of significance and that would impact the community or the country. So naturally, King Herod, who was well aware of the ancient Jewish prophecies about a Messiah being born, would have been consulting with astrologers to make sure that he didn't let this special Messiah person who was foretold be born and ruin his leadership and ruin his country, which is why if you know the biblical story, why after the wise men visited him, he went on a horrific rampage, killing every boy that had been born in that time frame that the astrologers, the wise men from the east, had told him was the time of this great birth. So there was this great massacre. It was terrible, terrible times. But the reason was King Herod consulted with astrologers to determine the time of a significant birth so that he could protect himself against these prophecies of a Messiah being born. So in that day and age, the astrologers would be able to foretell significant people being born, particularly by the planet Jupiter, which was known as the king of planets and was also known to, in the right circumstances, foretell significant kingly births that would occur. So they would track the progress of Jupiter, and they would also look at the movements of all the visible planets: Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, the sun and the moon and Venus and Mercury, obviously. But Jupiter was known as the king of the planets, and that's where they would get their clues as to significant, kingly, powerful births. So even today, actually, the sign of Aries rules the Middle Eastern countries such as Palestine and Israel and Judea. So that's today's rulership, and it was the same back then. The sign of the ram, Aries the ram, ruled those countries. So if we were looking for a significant event or a significant person being born who was going to impact Israel or Judea and those Middle Eastern communities, we would look for activity in the sign of Aries. So King Herod was keeping a pretty close watch on the sign of Aries through his astrologers for any particular activity, especially activity concerning Jupiter, that might manifest, because he was petrified of these messianic prophecies that were foretold. So if we look in the year 1 AD, which is traditionally the time that we consider Jesus to have been born, there is nothing. There is no activity in the sign of Aries that is of significance. Jupiter's not there, he's not making any particular aspects, etc. There's just nothing in the year 1 AD to herald any significant person being born that would influence Judea. But this is where the general scholarly, I'll get the words out, consensus kicks in, because most scholars agree that the year 1 AD is actually not when Jesus was born. And it comes down to the construction of our modern day calendar, which was put together by a monk, a very intelligent monk named Dennis the Little. In the year 6 AD, he put together the current calendar as we know it. However, it does appear, although he was intelligent, Dennis the Little was not the best mathematician, I'm afraid. So he miscalculated the reigns of the kings, which was how he worked out his calendar. And he miscalculated the reign of the kings by about 6 years, which takes us back to the year 6 AD. So there's this missing gap of 6 years. So some scholars differ. Some think it's 3 AD. Some, there isn't a general consensus around the actual year Jesus was born, but there's definite consensus that there is a mistake in the calculations of our modern day calendar, a mistake. But some scholars believe that the year 6 AD is actually the year Jesus was born because of those miscalculations. So we'll ask the question again, what was happening in Aries in that year, 6 BC? Well, fascinatingly enough, there was a great deal of significant activity happening in Aries, the ram that represents Judea and all those Middle Eastern countries. There was a lot of significant activity happening in 6 AD in Aries. For a start, Jupiter, the kingly planet, was in Aries for the majority of that year, 6 BC. So firstly, we've got Jupiter, the planet of the kings there. Well, that's enough to trigger King Herod to be a bit concerned right from the word go. But what else was happening? Well, on April 17th, 6 BC, Saturn moved into the sign of Aries, and combined there as well was the sun and the moon. So we had Saturn, we had Jupiter, we had the sun and the moon. So our modern day calculations actually reveal that on that day, the moon eclipsed. And when the eclipse passed, it revealed Saturn and Jupiter conjunct as the morning star. Now, those of you who are familiar with biblical prophecy know that Jesus is referred to throughout the ancient Old Testament prophecies as being the bright morning star. Very, very telling. So we have this morning star, Jupiter, conjunct Saturn. And this is going to occur again, not in the sign of Aries, obviously, but it's going to occur again in when Jupiter and Saturn are in the sign of Aquarius in 2.5 years' time. So that's something to look out for again. The bright morning star, or the conjunction rather, of Saturn and Jupiter will occur again. So collectively, with the sun and the moon and the eclipse and the bright morning star of Saturn and Jupiter all connecting in Aries on this morning, on the ascendant of the proposed chart of Jesus, heralds the birth of a super king. So is it any wonder Herod was shaking in his boots and called on the wise men from the east to tell him what was going on, who had they seen, where had they been? He was going to deal with this. So it's a really interesting connection to see how astrology actually does play out in this ancient story. But that is not all. When we look at the chart in totality, we can see that there is actually a yod shape pointing right at the ascendant, right at the moon, conjunct with Jupiter and Saturn. So here's this yod, finger of God shape, pointing at the ascendant. And this indicates that the life of the person who carries this chart would have a very special task, a very special purpose. Anyone who carries a yod is considered to have this very special purpose, but not many people have the collection of all these incredible planets, the eclipse, all in the one house, in their first house on the ascendant with a yod pointing at it. It's really a phenomenal chart. Now, unfortunately, as much as I would dearly love to show you the chart, it's Mercury retrograde season, and guess what? My computer has died, so I'm sorry, but I am not able to include a picture of this chart for this day. But if you have any astrology programs, you will be able to go through and calculate the day, 17th of April, 6 BC. Now, it's really important also to note, aside from the yod and the planetary configuration that occurred on this day in the morning, it's also really important to note that I'm just trying to think how to phrase this correctly. To be a person of impact in the world, you must have a significant celestial planet in your chart. That means Uranus, that means Neptune or Pluto, doing something powerful in your chart on an angle or conjunct your sun and moon is usually what we would look for. So when we look at this chart for the proposed birth of Jesus, I'm not going to say that it is the actual birth chart because no one was there at the time who is alive now to verify that, and we do not have a written date for his birth, an official written date for his birth. What we have is hearsay as the 25th of December, which again scholarly consensus says is not accurate. However, we look at the chart for the proposed chart for Jesus, and we can see that the formation of this yod shape includes, obviously, on the ascendant, Jupiter, Saturn, the moon, the sun, and the ascendant. And that's the finger, the point of the triangle in the yod. But the two other planets that form this powerful yod figure are Neptune and Pluto. So Neptune and Pluto are on the opposite side of the wheel chart. They sextile one another, and they form two trines to the ascendant and the planets in the stellium there. So definitely Neptune and Pluto are significant planets in this chart, and that indicates that this person, because we've got two out of the three celestial planets making a really powerful impact on the life of the person, that indicates that the person will have the capacity to be a world changer or an exceptional personality or someone with a great deal of influence on the world. So you take a look at your own chart. Do you have an influential celestial planet, Uranus, Neptune or Pluto? If you do, you have the capacity to be a world changer. But back to the chart of Jesus, astrologers at the time would not have been aware of this because they worked with the traditional planets that were visible to the naked eye. They worked with the planets up to Saturn. But we in today's age know that Uranus, Neptune and Pluto exist and have powerful influence on us. So we can now look back through our computer programs and see that, yeah, this was also impacting the chart of this person, proposed chart of Jesus, born on the 17th of April, 6 BC. So for illustrative purposes, I want to show you the shape of a yod so you would recognize it in your own chart if you needed to. So this is basically the shape of the yod in the proposed chart of Jesus. So here, excuse my diagrams, like I said, my computer is on Mercury retrograde time. This is the point of the yod, and this is where Jupiter, Saturn, the moon and the sun and the ascendant all would have been. Actually, I probably should flip that this way because we look at the ascendant on this side of the natal wheel. So this is the point of the yod. This is Neptune, this is Pluto. Now you can see if there was a wheel here, the wheel chart, which I probably should have drawn for you, sorry about that. These two, Pluto and Neptune, are making a sextile to one another, and they're pointing their influence at the personal life of the person, the ascendant, and all the planets located in the first house in whole sign astrology. So the influence of these two planets is powerful in only a harmonious way. There are only trines and sextiles, no hard aspects going on here, no squares, no oppositions, just trines and sextiles. So it's all harmonious and flowing. So the influence of Pluto and Neptune on this person through this yod, through this harmonious trinal influence, is about supernatural things. So when you have Neptune and Pluto trine to the moon and sextile one another at the same time, this is what you get. Supernatural experiences. You get supernatural experiences at a soul level, and Neptune is the planet of healing, obviously, who was considered to be one of the great, powerful supernatural healers. The stories of Jesus illustrate this. So there's that influence, and then there's also the Plutonian influence, which is very otherworldly. So you've got this angelic Neptunian planet with the healer, and then this Plutonian life-changing, powerful, very dynamic, powerful, mysterious planet, also influencing the supernatural, the unseen realms and the dark side of things. But it's coming at the personality of Jesus through this chart, through a trine, a harmonious aspect. So that indicates supernatural powers. So when we have Neptune and Pluto sextiling one another and making a trine aspect to the ascendant degree, what that indicates is that the person will have a great sense of aura of mysticism about them, something very unearthly and unusual from other realms. It also indicates that the person will be in a somewhat unusual environment, physically speaking. Neptune and Pluto are those other realm celestial planets, and they're influencing the earthly solar journey, which is seen by the first house. So it indicates that there's going to be the influence of an unusual surroundings, if you like. And if you want to read the story of Jesus, well, the claim is that he was the Son of God come down to live an earthly life. Well, that's a pretty unusual circumstance to be in, leaving heaven to come down to experience the earthly realm. And finally, we've got Neptune, sextile Pluto, both of them trining Jupiter, the planet of the kings, the one that the astrologers looked for significant people who would impact the life of a country in those ancient astrological terms when they used only the visible planets. This yod to Jupiter, what does it mean? Well, Jupiter represents religion. Jupiter represents a love of life, and the combination with Neptune and Pluto is the universal love for mankind. This is particularly Neptune-Jupiter stuff. Great perception, just the ability to have the most insightful understanding of human nature and motivations, just, psychic. Totally psychic. It's also a very peace-loving combination, and a tremendous love of humanity present with this configuration as well. So when we look from the modern perspective with these celestial planets, it just adds so much more weight to the already powerful and impactful ancient interpretation of the chart for this day. So I'm just like, wow, when I see this, like jaw hit the floor. I just love to see astrology working like this and how it all connects so perfectly. So modern astronomers who were looking for indications of, this Star of Bethlehem, so to speak, have been looking for years for comets that might have been going past at the time, exploding stars, or anything of an astronomical significance in the sky. And so they weren't looking at astrology. This was just not even on their radar, and so they missed the significance of what was occurring here. However, first century astronomers would not have missed this. They would have known this was coming. They probably would have seen it, calculated it coming years in advance. This would have been like big, powerful stuff. They would have known of the prophecies. They would have known the time. They would have known the configuration. They could see this coming, and they would have been excited. Hence, the wise men travelled from the east to be part of this event. And they would have been majorly impressed. So they were impressed enough to travel from the east to Judea for the birth of Jesus, and were present around that time. Now, interestingly enough, what lies east of Judea? Well, you've got Babylon, you've got Persia, and you've got former Sumeria. All those Mesopotamian regions. And what are they famous for? Astrology. That is considered to be the birthplace of astrology. Especially when we look at the evolution to modern contemporary astrology, that is where it's all stemmed from in the very beginning. So from the cradle of astrology, these wise men came to be present in Judea at the time of Jesus' birth. Now, whether or not you believe Jesus was the Son of God or have any religious inclination at all, that's not what I'm here to talk about today. That's got nothing to do with it, actually. What it is to do with is proving that a man named Jesus did exist, and he had a significant impact upon the planet. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot deny that the impact of a man named Jesus on the planet has been totally world-changing. And so it stands to reason that someone with so much impact and so much world-changing capacity must have a chart that supports that. And for me, when I look at the chart of April the 17th, 6 BC, I see there so clearly that that is the chart of somebody who has power and impact and world-changing ability. So regardless of your beliefs, I hope that this has been interesting for you on an intellectual level. And so now, as we approach the Christmas season and the solstice season, may your celebrations and your festivities bring you great joy, and may they bring you happiness that lasts all 2018 long. Thank you, and God bless.